if I look at those people right there, like, why am I any different from them? And I feel really fortunate that I was able to have that mindset. There's a lot of folks who, for a lot of reasons, aren't really raised to think that way. But I was just like, why them and not me?
On this podcast, we share inspirational stories, unique strategies, and the life lessons from entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and innovators in our communities who have transformed their lives and the community around them. Hi, my name is Kevin LePage, and you're listening to Exponentialists on Air. Today on Exponentialist on Air, we have Roman Gonzalez, someone who, when asked, preferred a fun, casual headshot over something more formal. And let me tell you, he brings that fun, quirky energy to his startup Gardenio and to his entire life, as I'm sure you will find out soon in this episode. Roman embodies an exponentialist, from his upbringing into him being in a startup right now today. Roman is dedicated to building his community leaf by leaf, garden by garden, and my excitement is surely overgrown by now, Roman. Welcome to the show. First off, I guess we can just start at the beginning. Tell me about your childhood and any obstacles you faced while you were young.
Oh, man. I feel like it's starting therapy session. I didn't do it until later, but I can start now. So I grew up in Corpus Christi, Texas. I was born in San Antonio, quickly moved to Corpus. And grew up there. It was a town with not a ton to do. I was a 90s and 2000s kid, and you just kind of had to find your own way to like fill the time. And with me, a lot of it was getting involved with student organizations. I was always really creative. I was always like, just wanted to like do stuff. And so that ended up, I also just didn't want to do the stuff that everybody else is doing. I was like National Honor Society, and there was like even like Spanish Honor Society. There was all this like other stuff that people were doing. And I was like, well, why? Like everybody's like just doing this for college credit. I want to do stuff that I actually like, the stuff I actually enjoy. And so I ended up doing like a lot of journalism. So I got involved with the student paper, and like really active in that. And I would like, other people on the team, they just wanted to like, just do these like whatever fun stories about cell phones. And I'm just like, no, I want to like talk to, a student going through cancer remission is one of the stories we did. Or I want to look at the Texas public education system and, do these more in-depth stories. And so I ended up working at some point for like 4 different publications. And I think that was kind of the sort of time of my life when I was also getting interested in philosophy, which would, define my life a little bit later. Sort of got into the culture of just asking questions, right? Like how to ask really good questions, whether it's, to find out somebody's own emotional journey or whether it's to sort of like understand the universe. And so yeah, in high school I was really active. And like I found through journalism and through eventually philosophy and other things that kind of like was able to be a good channel for a lot of my creativity and curiosity. And so, and I did a lot more besides that too, right? It was just being really, really active as much as I could, to the point to where like when I graduated high school, because in Texas they have like the top 10% of people, right? Like if you graduate in the top 10% of your class, you can go to I guess any public education in Texas. And so I actually wasn't in the top 10%. But like I didn't want that to stop me, because I felt like I was like, hey, I'm a smart guy. Like I'm hanging out with the valedictorian over here, and like I can keep up with him, right? Like, so for me, I was like, I have all this curiosity and potential, and so I want to shoot really high, and so I did, and so I wouldn't have gotten into UT if I'd applied, most likely, but I did get into Brown University, which in Rhode Island, and it's an Ivy League school, and I set my sights really high there, and so yeah, I think that it was a lot of the sort of early formative years was sort of being like, hey, like I recognize that like, and I was also competitive, right? So I was just like, if I look at those people right there, like why am I any different from them? And I feel really fortunate that I was able to have that mindset. There's a lot of folks who, for a lot of reasons, aren't really raised to think that way. But I was just like, why them and not me?
Yeah, right there I see that you're looking to aim high and you want to provide impact. And I see that kind of throughout your career progression, in which, especially going now with Gardenio, you're really trying to focus on the impact aspect instead of and trying to aim high for impact instead of maybe as much on the just trying to do it at a profit.
Yeah. And I think that it's something, and it's really cool seeing this sort of new wave of women and people of color entrepreneurs coming. And with that, I've seen just, and this is only I don't know the data here, but I've just seen a lot of folks who are also really interested in creating a stronger impact to their businesses that are not just profit driven. And I think it's like totally within the realm of women and people of color to like, hey, get your money. Like I think that's totally fine too. Like a lot of forces have kept people like that from getting their money, so do it. But it's sort of like there's just kind of more. There can be more on the line for us, and it's like we succeed, but then we look back at either our grandparents, or our parents, or relatives, and who maybe aren't in such awesome places. And there's this. We look at the communities we came from, and varying degrees of struggle in those communities, and we want to give back. We're like, we can't just do it. Right. We can't just look out for ourselves. We have to look out for everybody else because it's a big gap.
Right. Cognizant of the greater community around you.
Yeah.
I know through our organization, our RISE programs, these high schoolers create these ideas, and more often than not, they end up having a social aspect to them. Yeah. The idea that won last semester. It's
was it a gardening app? If it was a gardening app, I'm gonna be very upset. Just kidding.
It was gardening. It was aquaponics. Yes,
aquaponics. Yeah.
It was an aquaponics idea in which they wanted to use aquaponics to be a competitor of Gardenio, to help people garden. But it was that one's obviously a little bit more higher cost.
I actually don't even see it as competitive, right? Like, so I mean, the cool thing about this entire space is that everybody wants everybody to have quicker, more affordable, easy access to be able to grow their own food. So they can eat healthier, more nutritious food. It's like it's good for everybody, right? And so like everybody wants everybody else to win. And aquaponics, hydroponics, all those categories, they're a small percentage of the market right now, and but it's gonna keep growing. Like, yeah, there's room for everybody who's trying to make the world a better place.
Perfectly said. All right, and then moving out of high school, you got accepted to Brown University.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about your experience there and how much it was different than growing up in Corpus Christi.
Oh yeah, no, it was hugely different. I will say, just to kind of call out some folks, when I got into Brown, it was with a lot of effort, but I had a bunch of people help me along the way, and there was a woman, Mercedes Dominic, who was working particularly in the Valley, trying to recruit more students of color, Hispanic folks, particularly. And I was able to meet her through an organization. I was in the National Hispanic Institute, and that was really formative for me growing up. And I know there's a chapter in Austin. I helped lead the Corpus Christi chapter. Like organizations like that and people like that were able to believe in me and give me some of the resources where they weren't otherwise available to continue to like be curious and try and do big things, etc. And part of that was also that, and this is just kind of a funny side story. I did a journalism program. It was actually for the Asian American Journalists Association at the time, but it included all kinds of folks of color. So it was like an all expenses paid thing to NYU, and we talked to like Ed Bradley, Soledad O'Brien. It was like really cool. But a few months after that, and it's like my senior year at this point, and I'm thinking like, man, what my college application is going to be about? Like, I don't have any cool story. Like, I don't know. Like, I acknowledge I was raised with a decent degree of privilege, and then I get an email from the Today Show, and they're looking to like highlight different students and their college applications journey, and so they wanted me to be on the Today Show, and so over the next few months, like once or twice they had camera people come down and like do interviews with me and my family and like follow me around school. I was like the most popular kid in school. Like people who had never talked to me before, right? All of a sudden were like, "Oh, you're the cool kid," and so I ended up going and being on the Today Show, and which is really cool and good exposure and whatnot. But I say that, one, to acknowledge that happened, but two, that like not everybody needs to be on the Today Show to get into a school like Brown, right? Yeah. Like in fact, the recruiter Mercedes Dominic said actively, like, I don't care about any of this stuff, right? Like I don't care about it a single bit. So it was, but yeah. So there were these cool things happen just by putting myself out there, right? By like saying I'm going to be a part of this journalism program. I'm going to pursue this passion, etc. And so just continuing to put myself out there, I found, and just talking to people, meeting people, I found that to be really helpful. But yeah, you asked about college, and so when I went to college, it was very wildly different, and I couldn't put my finger on it at the time. But like, I don't know, one thing that's kind of illustrated is like, I grew up in Corpus Christi. Like my parents aren't like super fancy people, right? We didn't like grow up in high society or anything like that. Like they grew up super poor, right? And so, and that stays with you. And so, I remember there was a dude there who like I heard that he was having like a wine and cheese party
At Brown?
Yeah, at Brown, and he's like having a wine and cheese party at Brown, and like and I'm just like, oh man, that guy like sucks or something. Like he's probably like really rich and whatnot, and like turns out he's just like a he also grew up in some struggle in Queens, but even like just a wine and cheese party just made me feel really alienated because I'd never been anything like that, right? Like it was such a culture shock, and there was this feeling that everybody there like knew something that I didn't. You know what I mean? So the first 2 years were a little rough, and but as with all things over time, I was able to kind of like find my place at the school. I helped start a TV station there, or there was a TV station that had actually started by Doug Lyman, who did like the Bourne Identity, the Bourne Trilogy, all that kind of stuff, in addition to other things. He started in 1987. And through the 90s, it kind of, in the early 2000s, it started to kind of wane. And so by the time I got there, and I wanted to make films at the time, I was like, I want to study philosophy, I want to make films. Basically nobody was watching it. It was like all these equipment from the 1980s, just sort of stacked up on the third floor of some building. And so we got some people together, and we went from having 4 people to like 300 people over a couple of years. We raised like over $40,000 just to get equipment so other people could make films. We did all that research ourselves. We put together budgets and pitched them in front of the student board to get money for it. So it really was just a lot of, at that time, just like hustling and being on the computer a lot and making paperwork and just talking to people, getting people excited. And it was doing all this stuff of an entrepreneur. But I just didn't think about it that way at the time. Because again, it was this thought that like, oh, entrepreneurs, like, I don't know, that's, even though both my parents are self-employed, one's an insurance adjuster, another's like a personal trainer, they're sole proprietors, which is just a different kind of a thing than...
starting a corporation, a company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was like, oh, that's for other people. That's not for me. I just have big ideas and I'm going to make that happen in the world. And I think that contributes to sort of my emphasis on impact too. It wasn't until I got out of college later that I kind of acknowledged, oh, that's what all this is, right? And also, like, I don't know, when you're in college, especially a school like that, it's like, I was a philosophy kid. I just wanted to, like, think about life and the universe and the world, right? And all those business kids sucked, right? Like, it's just like, all they're talking about is, like, money and just, like, spreadsheets. And, like, hey, I can do a good spreadsheet. But it was just, they weren't my people. But yeah, I mean, college was tough, but I kind of sort of said, let's just take the playbook from high school and just... don't put as much emphasis on my schooling, even though I did well in my classes, and just do everything outside of it. Build what you want. So I, created different classes. I coordinated the program for folks who created their own classes. I worked for the film festival there. I started not only Brown TV, but the first live news show that's been there in 20 years. And so it was just like constantly filling my time with just how do we build and create all these things and learn a lot.
So what I'm catching from your college experience is that while you weren't necessarily in business or you weren't actually, taking to entrepreneurship classes or management classes, you were actually like putting those skills to use. And what you're like hustling, you're actually founding things, you're organizing people. Yeah. And I can see that kind of sets the foundation for what you've been a part of recently. Absolutely. You don't need to take like a how to business class 101, you know what I mean? And those are probably good, especially when it comes to being able to like manage money effectively. But otherwise, I mean, it's energy. It's your ability to get other people on board. It's, making a thing happen with very little resources, not making excuses, right? Like I was reading an article today about like a lot of people in early stage companies. They always say like, oh, but I need money. I need money for this idea, right? And they just have like something on the back of a napkin. And they're like, okay, now I'm going to go raise money. But the first thing you need is not money. You need a market, and you need to figure out like, oh, do people even want this thing, right? Yeah. And there's a lot you can do for free, or at least very, very cheap. But I mean, talking to people's free. Walking into a coffee shop is free, and even just getting feedback that way is a good start to a business. But yeah, a lot of those, again, it doesn't have to be a business class. It can just be the act of coming up with an idea and making it happen, whatever that is. Whether that's a film, whether that's a newspaper, whether that is a marketing strategy. In every field, people are doing this. But they think, because it's not this exact thing, then I can't do it. But skills are very, applicable. Yeah, the skills of entrepreneurship, just like innovating in any industry can be applied to every sector and industry. Absolutely. Then coming right out of Brown, where'd you go?
Yeah, so at the time I was like, right, I want to make these films. I'd taken a bunch of screenwriting courses. I had like some scripts, and I was like, okay, well maybe, I could go to LA, I could go to New York, you can go to, and there's Austin, which has a really burgeoning film scene, and but it's also got this like cool comedy scene. It's also got this cool tech scene, and it's small enough to where if you do something cool and big, you actually get heard. As opposed to these other cities where you can just be drowned out and how big everything is and everybody's doing something cool and amazing. And so I was like, okay, and it happens to be close to home. I know some people there from high school, so I was like, okay, cool, I got a network, and so maybe I'll just go to Austin and I'll get a day job and I'll work on the scripts, and then eventually I'll move to LA and I'll make it.
How'd that turn out?
Yeah, well, I may have opened the screenwriting program like twice in the year after I moved to Austin. Because in 2011, it was really difficult to find a job. Like, nobody in Texas cares if you have like a fancy degree from Brown University. They're like, oh, I had a cousin who went to Brownsville. Like, like people, they just didn't really care. And then, especially with philosophy. And I had, in college, in addition to all the organizations I started, I had like 5 different jobs at one point, right? And so like I had practical experience in marketing and video production, which was, that was the field I was going in. I had built strategies for companies already and gotten paid for it, but something, it was tough for everybody in 2011, and for me especially. And I applied to over 300 jobs in that year, and none of them, except for one catering company in Corpus Christi, Texas, wanted to hire me. And it was this weird feeling because it was just, especially, again, as a Hispanic middle class kid, you're just sort of like, I thought I did everything right, like I got into a good school, I made good grades, I was always active, I wasn't doing like drugs, I didn't even drink, and then you're hit with this reality, and it's just like, oh, I thought this was worth something, and so it was really tough, like failure became a part of my identity, right? Just rejection entirely, and I mean, Hula Hut wouldn't even hire me, and I was they looked at, they're like, what are you doing here? They were like, you went to Brown, why you want to work at Hula? Like, everybody could see it on my face, right? I was just, but yeah, so it was this weird space to be in. But so I was going between Austin and Corpus for a year, sort of staying. I was staying on a futon in a kitchen of my friend's place. And I stayed there for like 2.5 months, like rent free. Then they're like, yo, you should really like pay your rent. Yeah, like a little. And I was working at a movie theater at the time and like scrubbing floors and stuff. And I was doing odd jobs like flyering around UT campus and whatnot. And I was like, oh man, I can't do that. I don't have money. And so I went back to Corpus, and finally I came to South by Southwest in 2012, and there was a job fair, and I got a low paying job there doing customer support. They moved me to Austin. I was just like, as long as it gets me here, that's fine. Found out I didn't really know anybody in Austin. I like my friends from high school just kind of chilled out in their house all day, and I wanted to do big things. And so I had to just kind of start building that network. And so over that year, just would go to networking events, just meet as many people as I can. I was already going to startup events. I did a three-day startup program.
I heard of it.
Yeah. And I know UT has one. They have it all over the world. And so I did that program, and that kind of was like, that terrified me, because even though I thought I was really skilled at the time, I had a lot of imposter syndrome, especially in spaces like that. Especially because a lot of them are like predominantly white spaces, and I didn't even think about it at the time. My mind wasn't politically there at the time, but like, it's looking back that I'm like, oh, it's because like nobody looked like me, like that it felt so weird to be in those rooms. So yeah, I did that program, and then and I had that job in tech support, and I got a call from a friend who worked for the Obama campaign in Ohio. He was like, hey, we need organizers over here. Like, do you want to come? And I was like, yes. Like, I would do anything to quit that job. Like, I was like, it was a rough time. And so I remember my birthday was August 17th. And on August 15th, I got the call. And they were like, you're in. Can you be here in 2 days? And so I put everything in my car, big old Ford Explorer, and drove across the country to Columbus, Ohio, where I worked as an organizer for a period of time. And that like also set the bar for like the level of impact that I wanted in the job. And yeah, so it's you really felt like you were having an impact. And it was a tight race, and we won Ohio, and it was, historically known as one of the best ground games in the history of, modern politics. And I was a part of that, and that felt really cool. So I came back and I was like, oh man, now I got this Obama thing on my resume. Maybe it'll be better. And it was still rough, but I had some folks in town take me under their wing. Kevin Coyme of Tech Ranch had me do some work with him for a while. Dan Driscoll, did a little free work for him. I mean, I had to do free work. And I got by a little bit on consulting gigs. And, my parents weren't sending me money or anything. That just has never been the thing. They didn't pay for a penny of college, nothing like that. And so they took me under their wing, and I got introduced to a company called Twofer. So Twofer was actually at the Longhorn startup camp at the time, and it was a professor, Josh Alexander, there, and he had gone to Wharton MBA program, and he saw me, and he was sort of like, oh man, there's this underutilized kid, this whiz kid over here, and we can have him do marketing, also very inexpensive, and so I joined that team. They hired me, and that was my first real salary job, and it was not until 2013 after getting out of college in 2011. And so, I mean, it was a tough road, but it was amazing, right? And now I'm a startup, and it's less than 10 people, and I'm the only marketing hire, and we have a CMO consultant, but and I'm coming, I have the responsibility I want. I'm being able to come up with these large marketing strategies. I'm figuring things out. I'm learning new things. I'm operating the whole thing. And I do that for a year and a half before I get super, super burned out. And in that process, I start really getting interested in product design. So I had this background in marketing, right?
Right.
And so now I wanted to switch over, how do I don't want to just talk about solving problems. How do I actually solve those problems? Mm-hmm. And what skill sets do I need?
So how did you make that pivot?
Yeah. So my pivot into the design world happened a little bit at Twofer, that I had the marketing role, right? But we were working on websites, and so I was really interested. My job is to generate leads for the company, and so in order to do that, you can drive as much traffic as you want, but if your website kind of sucks, people don't get it, people don't understand it, they're just going to go away real quick. And so I was really interested with the experience of when they come here, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Do you look like a modern company? Do they know what we do? Is the story told in a really interesting way? How do they, what's the flow for them to actually fill out, a contact form? So I started kind of doing that, mapping that, and not really even realizing I was doing kind of user experience stuff. And I worked on that with a partner, a friend from high school who was in Baltimore. He was a biz dev guy, but he got picked up by Nook. He was just doing design stuff on the side because he saw the people at his company were getting paid tons of money for making super crappy PowerPoints. So he was like, I can do this. And so he started doing web design, posted it up. He got hired by Nook, then by PayPal, then by Airbnb. Mm-hmm. Now he was with Khan Academy. And so at the time, he hadn't even gotten Nook yet. And so I worked on it with him, and he was just really talented. And we just kind of passed things back and forth, iteration after iteration after iteration. Must have done 30 different versions of that website. And I got another marketing gig after I left Twofer, but that whole time I'm doing contracts kind of in the background. And I'm getting the contracts because the friend from Baltimore, his name's Vivek, he's getting them because he's got a big logo on his resume, right? And I'm also going to events in town, just talking to people, and they're like, "Who's a designer in the room?" And I'm like, "I am," even though I didn't really believe it at the time. And so then they'd be like, "Oh, do you want to work on this project?" And I was like, "Well, how much money?" And and I was undercharging. If I did a contract right now, I'd still probably undercharge. Shouldn't say that on a podcast, but
ladies and gentlemen,
yeah, but yeah, and so I just started doing that, and eventually that ended up in one of the contracts leading to a kind of more full-time thing, sort of. So there was a company that I did work for. They were like, "We really like it. What do we have to do to hire you?" Mm-hmm. And so I was at a marketing job at the time, and they were like, "We'll pay you as much as you're making at your marketing job, but you only have to work 25 hours a week, and we'll fly you out to San Francisco once a month, and you can just stay there for once a month and work there." And I was like, "Yep." I quit the next day. And yeah, so then I had that gig. They ran out of money, and then I still have a day job. I work at Rackspace, and so I got hired there through a recruiter, and where I've been the past 3 years. And I went there because I really wanted to get better at user research, and they had an amazing department at the time. Right. So it's a bunch of people kind of taking shots on me, but it was only also because I was able to kind of piece together that story and draw a through line. Talking about it right now without there's nothing on the line that it's a little piecemeal here and there. I knew that I just wanted to do a bunch of things, right? And I'm sure for a lot of people listening, it's the same thing. It's like, oh man, but I have all these ideas, but I have all these things I want to learn. I have all these things I want to do. And I satisfied that itch by going and trying to do a bunch of things, right? And that's okay when that's like what your 20s are about. And late teens and stuff. It's just like, try everything, just see what you like, and you'll learn something. You can take this lesson from here, apply it there. And so now with Gardenio, I can't imagine doing anything else.
Mm-hmm. And so with Twofer, you were an early employee.
Yeah, early employee.
So now you've transitioned from being an early employee of a startup and worked with many other startups, and pivoting from going from marketing now into like just design, system operations, and focusing on the UI. Mm-hmm. So how did that bring you to Gardenio? Gardening.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even for some people who knew me, they were just sort of like, gardening? You garden? Well, that was like 4 or 5 years ago. I like needed to change my relationship to food. I just like wasn't very healthy. I needed to change that. And I had always kind of been interested in cooking, and I was just a really curious dude. And so I was like, okay, I'm like, maybe we're going to make like a good salsa or a tomato sauce or something. Like, how do you make it? And so look at all these recipes, you look at the common themes, etc., and all the techniques. But then it's like, oh, well, you need good tomatoes. And there's all these different kinds of tomatoes, right? Some are better for this, some are better for that, because some are meatier or whatnot. And so it's like, okay, well, like, how do you make good tomatoes? Well, you grow the tomatoes. And I was like, okay, well, what allows you to grow a good tomato? And so I started to get really interested in that. So it's this like huge line. Like when you start thinking about where your food comes from, there's this big complex chain of things that happen, but it all comes from stuff from the ground. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was really fascinating just intellectually. I saw that learning about this could also help me with my own kind of health journey. That plants also help people with their mental health in addition to their physical health. And that it's just so fundamental. Now you have this thing that's, the philosopher in me kind of started kicking in, and it was like, oh man, like, by giving people plants and teaching them how to grow their own food, that's something that's so uniquely human. It's so, core to what it means to be alive, to be human. And so by putting plants in people's hands, you're actually connecting them to this uniquely, cosmic experience, right? We've been growing our own food for like 20,000 years. It's like in our bones, right? Like the desire to like go outside and put our hands in the dirt. And like there's plenty of studies that show that putting your hands in the dirt does very good things for you, right? It makes you just feel good. Being outside makes you feel good. And so if you can put plants in people's hands, you're doing something really cool and impactful. And also it happens to be that like 80% of new gardeners every year between the ages of 18 and 34, it's a $3.6 billion market. Like there's already money being spent here, right? It was that combination of like all these personal things going on in my life, trying to grow it myself, and then seeing that there's market opportunity that is like, okay, you can do good and do well at the same time, right? And for me, it was that I tried growing my own food. There's a plant sale. I like bought 13 plants, and I like came home and I just had no idea what to do with them. And I had this big bed, and it was just like half filled with dirt. Just none of it made any sense. Everything failed, and so it wasn't, it wasn't a great experience. And I was like, well, what if I could take all this design training, right, to sort of like reshape, give people proper expectations, give people the information they want when they want it, give people the things they want when they want it, right? So I can design this kind of different gardening experience. Then I can take that marketing background, and sort of change the way we even talk about gardening, right? Yeah. This is not just something that is for, like 50-year-old folks in their flower shirts outside, after they retire. I don't know, people don't retire at 50, but that, what if the people who are actually growing are like around our age, and they're just really interested in getting away from their phones and getting more in touch with nature. And so I have these sort of unique skill sets that I can then apply. And I've had this entrepreneurial streak the whole time, right? That we can do something really impactful and meaningful in the world, and also ideally, achieve financial comfort down the line after all the hard work, and start to create intergenerational wealth within the Latinx community, right? Like that's the goal.
And so in those 13 dead plants grew a business.
Yeah.
So
that's a good way of putting it. I got to use that line.
Thank you. And growing this business, obviously you probably had to overcome obstacles, and you're probably even overcoming those right now as a business continues to grow. So what's been one of your greatest obstacles and something that you really had to learn more about once you tried starting your own company?
Operations was something that I didn't have as much experience with before. So I had experience with product, with marketing. I've managed developers, and so the technology part of it is manageable for me. But when it came to operations, right, how do we source everything the right way? How do we make sure we have enough? How do we, what's the cost per, particular thing that we produce? Because our products, they look very simple, but they're kind of complex to produce sometimes.
And you had been in doing software before, and now you had to go into not just like hardware, you had to go into, plants, living things, trying to source those.
And it's actually, it's a cool opportunity too, that it's like, so I was going from software to consumer packaged goods. And the CPG space, for short, if you're, in the know. So now you have goods, right? And goods have to sit in a place. And we don't just have normal goods. We're not just selling microphones or something like that, right? We can't just sit on a shelf forever. Or we have plants, and they're alive, and they have feelings, and like you need to be able to give them the things that they need when they need it, etc. It's a very kind of unique supply chain and operations problem. And one that, garden centers across the country have their own ways of doing it. There's some cool companies out of California, like finding cool ways to do it. But like we're effectively, right now we're a one-person team. We've had like 30 people help, over 30 people over the past year, just volunteering their time because they liked what we were doing, etc. But it's just a one-person team. And so really the biggest challenge, even beyond learning operations, has been just bandwidth and just like team. Right, because we're still pre-funding. Like we're going to raise a round pretty soon. I'm lucky enough to have a day job that's flexible, that pays me pretty well, that I can put forward a couple $100 every month. I can put that toward the business. But I don't want to keep doing that, and we need to grow. And when you don't have money, you can't pay people, and a lot of people don't understand equity. Right, so you can pay people in cash dollars, or you can pay them in a percentage of the company, and that can be very complex, and people can get very weird and cagey about it, and everybody's like, it's Facebook, you're going to steal my idea or something like. But yeah, people don't understand it very well, so as a result, people aren't that willing to work for that, especially from people who don't come from like finance heavy backgrounds. It's not taught. I wish it were. So yeah, some of the biggest challenges have been, and sure, learning some new things, but I feel like reasonably capable to learn most things, as long as it's not like, writing lines of code. But the biggest thing has just been like, man, we have such limited resources, like now in terms of money, in terms of the amount of people that can work on it at a given time. Yeah,
and I think just what you said right there about limited resources, that's kind of what entrepreneurship is. Kind of pursuing something through a limited resources. That scarcity really makes entrepreneurship what it is.
Yeah.
And I think, that can even go along with all the way back in college, trying to create everything that you did with limited resources at the university.
Yeah. Eventually the job of a founder CEO is in raising money and convincing people that, you're going to be successful. You're going to return a business, or you're just going to be so inspiring. You're going to build something great. They don't know how it's going to work, but you sound just crazy enough to be right, and they just hand you a check. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of like that's how people invest. But yeah, that ability to sell yourself, but also, also that commitment to sort of, I'm going to at every step where I'm like, I can't do this. It's like, okay, but what else, right? So it's like, I can't. For instance, we would be really great if we could like custom make our own boxes. Like if we could like just get boxes shipped to us, so that then we can then put stuff in them, right? That'd be really nice, but we don't have that luxury right now. So we've found it. We've had to go to the box store and know all about boxes and the thickness of boxes and what they're made of and how boxes fit inside other boxes, and then all the packing material and why this is better than the other, and this one's a little more sustainably produced than the other one, right? And it's just it's interesting in its own way. But yeah, you sort of you go in and you say, hey, Mr. Boxman, like I don't know anything about this stuff. Like, can you help me out? Right? I think that's also just another thing worth kind of mentioning, that I think there's a lot of people that it's like, I have to mastermind this all in my head. And I'm just going to sit in my room forever and I'm just going to think about it. It's going to be great. And then those are often the people that are like, somebody's going to steal my idea. But you really have to like get out there and talk to people about it, and also just like make calls and go into places. I'm still guilty of spending too much time behind the laptop, and I just need to be on the phone, or I need to be out in a store or out at a networking event talking to people. It's so easy to go into strategy mode, but so much of entrepreneurship is, like you kind of alluded to, it is just doing the work. And I think there have been different points at sort of my journey in Gardenio where it's sort of like I hit a point and I'm just like, things aren't moving as fast as I want. And it's like, man, it's because like, if we do this, it's going to be like a lot of work and we're going to have to cut everything. And, and it's like, okay, well, shut up and just do it. Right. Like, yeah. So, I'm talking to myself here. And you have to say, it's going to be a lot of work. And so just, I don't know, book a whole Saturday and do it. And again, I have the luxury of Saturdays, not everybody does, but, we all work within our means.
Mm-hmm. You pretty much led straight into my next question when you said that you have to reach out for help. It's not just going to be yourself. Mm-hmm. And so how has mentorship and sponsorship helped you along the way? Who's been a major mentor, and what has that meant to you throughout the steps?
When you say sponsorship, I think money, and I'm just like, oh man, I wish somebody was giving me. I mean, it's been an important part of it. There were people who took me under their wing. I didn't mention Ruben Cantu in town. I mean, a lot of the folks that have helped me have been from the Hispanic community, or they've been like folks of color who recognize that like I am also on a journey that they are on, and that they want to help me along the way, and plenty of other folks as well that are just like seeing that potential. So it's been important to like have those shots, right? And that's what like mentors have been able to do. They just like, they give me those shots, and it's over time. They see the work that I do. They see my passion, my commitment, and it's really only kind of like now, or in the past few months, that relationships that I started a year ago are starting. Some of those people are starting to come back and be like, "Hey, man, I love what you've been doing with Gardenio. Like, let's talk. Let's meet. Like, I want to help this way or do this." So and those are people who've been keeping up the whole time, and I've been able to ask questions. So yeah, I mean, it's always going to be pivotal. I think sometimes it can feel scary too. I know, even with me still. So to be like, hey, will you be my mentor? It sounds silly to me just because I didn't grow up with that kind of thing, that kind of culture. And I was very much like, I'm going to figure it out myself because I'm independent. But I think it is really important. And I think there's actually like a really great pool of like female entrepreneurs that help other, younger female entrepreneurs. And I think it's really fantastic. And there's so many resources for that in town. For non-female entrepreneurs, there's still so many opportunities. You go to like any tech event, it's mostly guys there anyway. There's plenty of opportunities to go out there and meet people, and just, it's on you to kind of follow up and sort of say like, hey, enjoyed our conversation. Can we, get coffee again? And hey, I'm really having trouble here. Could you be, would you have any interest in being my mentor? I really want one. And I really love what you do. This is why I love it. And, I want to keep close contact with you. Yeah, and then you ask, and the worst they can say is no. And I mean, you got to get used to being told no as an entrepreneur too. So.
Yeah, that's perfect advice for any of our listeners out there who are looking for, if you want to go talk to somebody, learn about anything, just go out and do it.
Yeah. And also like find them on LinkedIn. Like it sounds really lame, I think, if you're in college to be like, get on LinkedIn. Like I wouldn't have hung out with that guy in college, but like everybody's on there, and you should be too if you're looking to try and do big things, and just reach out. Some of, we've had advisors come on just based on a cold LinkedIn email. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it works. It doesn't always, but sometimes it does.
Yeah, there's LinkedIn, and then my favorite social media is Venmo.
The kids aren't really on Venmo these days, are they?
I don't know.
Oh, man.
Just have to see. Venmo, the top social media app.
I was going to go back to all my like 30-year-old friends and be like, yo, dude, Venmo's where you got to be. Like, people started sort of saying, like, oh, can I like, because I was like, oh, you want to just like find me on Facebook? They're like, oh, do you have an Instagram? I'm like, I do. And that's when I was like, oh, no, I'm old. Okay, I mean.
All right. Now, one thing that I saw is that you did some consulting work for a moonshine distillery company. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how that happened.
Yeah, that was cool. So I feel like I'm like going to run for office one day, and they're going to be like, excuse me, sir, we see that you were at a moonshine company. Is that legal? No. So when I had the job running design and research and product for the company out of the Bay Area, and I was working 25 hours a week, and that was actually where I learned a really important lesson that I'm totally ignoring right now, which is that time is a currency all in itself, right? Just having time. And so I was just like, okay. And so there's like one weekend, I just went to this like moonshine tour of Crystal Creek Moonshine. Some cool folks started that. They were younger than me at the time, and they got a little bit of money to start it up, and they were really nice and cool and informal, and I dug it. And I was like, hey, actually, this is when I was at the marketing job that I really hated before. I was like, hey, like I really hate my job. Like, can I just like work for you guys? Like, you don't have to pay me or anything. I just kind of want to like be here and learn how to make moonshine. I want to, I always had this dream of like I would make a whiskey distillery when I was older. I was really into whiskey. And so they were like, well, we like can't pay you in money. I'm like, oh, that's fine. They're like, well, we can pay you in moonshine. And I was like, that is an acceptable currency. And so I was the coolest guy for like a year because every party I was like, got moonshine again. And so I helped them get into different tech events and do a bunch of promo. And I helped manage some parts of the distillery, and did a couple runs with them, and moonshine runs where they actually distill the moonshine. And we did it under a full moon. It was really fantastic, actually. And so yeah, just like learned a lot and got to like meet a bunch of people, and nobody ever complains or gets mad at the guy who brings in the alcohol. And so it was a good opportunity for me to just get my face in front of a bunch of people in tech who I had really wanted to. It wasn't as meditated as this, but if it were, and let's just say it was, and that I'm a genius, that it allowed me access to folks and events that otherwise I wouldn't have had quite so much access to. It was a great time.
Okay, I read that you can play the banjo.
Yeah, well, man, now I'm like scared of where
I don't have a banjo. There's not going to be any test.
Yeah, so in general, I'm a self-taught musician. Mm-hmm. So I grew up, my whole family, like everybody plays guitar. My mom like played clarinet or whatever, and so we all grew up playing to varying degrees. And so bass was my first instrument because I wasn't good at guitar. And then I got better at guitar, and then I took some keys lessons when I was younger. And so like I'm not like amazing at like any instrument that I play. I'm not the guy who's gonna like bust it out at parties and just be like, oh, look how awesome I am. And that's just never been what's important to me. But like I do think this goes back to the sort of applicability of skills for entrepreneurship, that it's like I can play guitar reasonably well. I feel confident on it. And some of these skills should be transferable to other string instruments. I think any musician listening right now is like, no, you're wrong, he's wrong. But I found that it was much easier to learn than if I had just started from scratch. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I was I don't know, maybe I listened to too much Mumford and Sons. I don't know, I didn't really like them, but
got inspiration from Kermit the Frog.
Yeah, from Kermit the Frog and Steve Martin. But I got really interested in it, and I was like, oh, this is kind of like a cool thing. It's got a very cool tone, and I've written music for a long, long time. Since I was like 12. It's like the thing I've done longer than I've done anything else. And not many people know that because they don't show a ton of people the music because it's for me. And I was like, this is really cool. I'd really love to learn it. And so I was able to get a banjo and teach myself clawhammer style. There's like 3 different styles. And I was really interested in kind of like the old folk style, the kind of like, like cowboy in the desert, and it's just like he's about to die, and
about to die, pulls out a banjo.
Exactly, and he plays one more song, just like he plays "Oh Death" or something. So yeah, that was really interesting to me, and I heard some banjo music. There's some people doing really cool stuff with banjo music. There's an artist called Sam Amidon, and so I've always wanted to just create this kind of like weird, colorful, highly textural music. And so banjo led me to do that, and so it's been a minute for sure since I played it, but it's I was raised on a lot of punk rock music, and so my biggest thing when playing banjo was just I just want to go fast. I just want to go fast. And so
2 things that are eerily similar: punk rock and banjo.
Yeah. I was gonna start a banjo synth punk band, and that was gonna be my thing. So I don't know. Hopefully, business is a better idea than that.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mind saying it, so we'll see.
Next time I come back, it's going to be a banjo synth rock star.
Oh,
yeah. So
dang.
Yeah, dang. You just wait.
All right, and then probably one of my last questions, but I saw that you have I don't know exactly what to call it, but it was more of the backyard. I think you called it like an experimental storytelling night.
Yeah.
You raise money for charities and nonprofits, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about that and how that seems to relate to your mission for impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, storytelling is an incredibly effective medium to get people to like understand other people's points of views, really have empathy for other people. So I moved into this house in 2013, had this big back porch, and I was just renting it. It's kind of the first time I had a space where I could invite people and host people. And I did that a lot as a kid. I would just say, hey, everybody come over. My mom's making sandwiches. But I hadn't been able to do that for most of my college life and after college because I was so transient. And so finally I had this space. And so we started inviting people over. And for me, it was just like, I just want to invite all these people who like I'm thankful for, who have helped me in all these rough times, and just show them a really like cool time where it's like there's interesting drinks, there's interesting conversation. We started doing that, and eventually, people just kind of like start telling stories, and so we just all started kind of sharing stories at these parties, and then we had somebody move in who had a little more experience with the kind of formal storytelling scene, and so he was like, we should do like a story night. And so we started it there. It's called Hyde Park Storytelling. It's still alive today, but I also wanted something that was like, okay, like let's talk about stuff that's like really kind of ugly or really difficult or really challenging or kind of tense, right? Mm-hmm. Stuff. I'm really interested in art that challenges people. I wanted to start this experimental storytelling night where every single time we do some kind of experiment on the theme or on the speaker list or the format, right? So it's just it satisfies my need for things to always be trying new things. But it brings people together to challenge themselves on a given idea. So the first one we did was on death, right? I was sort of like, I want to open this up, and it wasn't like, oh, death, like the lives and stories. It was sort of just like death. We're not gonna skirt around it or be like, oh, but life is beautiful. It's like, let's earnestly talk about these experiences that we have. And it was heavy. Like there were parts that got really, 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 really heavy, and there were some parts that were really amazing. We had a woman tell a story about how she talked to like her cat about, because cats have multiple lives, they say that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, and how she talked to her cat about that experience, and I'm just like, this is so wild. But it's like by the end of it, I was like near tears. You forget that she's talking about talking to a cat. So it was these really cool vibes, and what we said is that like, okay, well, every time we do this, I want to be able to get people in the habit of like giving to causes they care about. Mm-hmm. And I want to introduce people to maybe causes that they haven't heard about, organizations in town doing good work. And this felt like my shot, since I had full creative control, to be able to do that. That if we bring people in who by demographic information are okay with the idea of being challenged, and then we're going to get an alcohol vendor and just kind of experience this new thing going into a weird place. And hear these true stories about people's lives on stage. It's 5 to 8 minutes. There's eight of them, split into 2 acts. One of the experiments that we ran was like having somebody on stage asking the other person questions as they're telling their story, right? So, because normally a lot of times it can be like hyper rehearsed, right? Yeah. And so we wanted to like break that. So we had somebody on stage trying to go a little deeper. Then at the end we had the audience ask questions, and it was great. That was one of the best ones we've ever thrown. And everything we do, in addition to raising money for nonprofits, it's safe spaces, right? Open to folks from the LGBTQIA community, open to folks of all colors. We're very intentional about in our speaker list, everything we do, being active about making sure that we have a diverse set of speakers, not only on race and gender, but in age as well. And so we feel like we've been able to accomplish that pretty well and bring people together. And it's still like, I don't do it as much these days because if it's not Gardenio, I'm not doing it as much. I mean, those are some of the times when I just feel most fulfilled, because it's like, hey, every dollar tonight goes to people who need it more than we do, right? And also you get to meet all these cool people. So yeah, it's a really special thing that I think something about millions, I'll go back to throwing.
Yeah, I mean, that really emphasizes the impact both on the people who were there, on the charities.
Absolutely.
And just a little bit more about...
Nobody loses, except for me losing like $100 or something like that. But.
So for my last question, mm-hmm. for the audience, what is a key piece of advice you would give to a young person who is looking to build themselves in their communities through either entrepreneurship or thought leadership or just through anything?
Make your bed. I have better advice than that. I think that I'm driven a lot by the idea that like I am a part of something bigger happening, which is a lot of underrepresented folks in technology and business are now, there's an open eye culturally toward the fact that they have been underrepresented, and people want to do something about it. And I'm really driven by the idea that like if I don't do this, somebody else will. And like if I want to have high impact, right? Because that's the goal, right? I don't just need feel goods, and everybody has their different needs. So I'll even say before that, just sort of like advice: find out what kind of like person you are, and if you're an impact driven person, whether that needs to be 1-to-1, or whether you don't care, as long as, like, I don't know, we save 1 million babies, right? And you never have to meet a single baby. And people are at different points on that gradient. And I found that I'm a little bit in the middle, right? That, like, I don't want to just, like, make a millions of dollars, making, I don't know, apples with blades in them, and then, like, giving that money to charity or something. Like, I need the work that I do to be fulfilling and meaningful and impactful. But also I want to have as high impact as I can, right? And so finding that out for yourself is kind of like the first step there. But then so for me, I'm driven by the idea of, again, if I don't do this, somebody else is going to get that seat at the table. And that's not just for me, right? Like, I'm not in this so I can have a seat at the table with all the rich folks so that I can have a better car or something. I do not care about that. It's because when you have that seat at the table, then you can do things like channel money to nonprofits that are, serving the places like where we grew up. Or you can help support and amplify the voices of social movements that stand for, what you stand for, right? And, historically we've lacked access to resources. And so how can we be most effective at getting those resources? And, it's not all on your shoulders, right? And I have to remind myself of that too. It's not all on my shoulders, but, like, I feel capable. I feel like I can do it, and I want to do it, and I'm going to have a fun time doing it. So I think everybody has to find kind of their own path to impact and their own scope of impact. But I mean, to folks early on, it's sort of like the greater you have an understanding of that in yourself, I think you're just going to waste less time and save yourself from some rough emotions the closer you get to learning about yourself. And to that end, everybody listening, the best thing actually I can advise, go to therapy because that will catalyze your self-knowledge and your self-confidence in a way that again will help you not only in your professional career and your ability to talk to other professionals, but also in your personal career. Yeah, I'm going to use this as a platform to say everybody go to therapy.
Amazing. Extremely insightful. Thank you very much. That's going to be my last question today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You have a good one. And if anybody's interested in learning more about Gardenio, you can go to growgardenio.com. You can buy plants on there. Reach out to me if I said anything that you liked. Don't reach out to me if I said anything that you didn't like. But otherwise, and we're always looking for help on the team. Follow us at Grow Gardenio on Instagram and on Facebook. And hope you will grow with us. Yeah.
Going back to growth. Yeah.
There you go.
I like it.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Since interviewing Roman, his company Gardenio is live and it's growing. I am so excited for Roman right now as he is selling plants at growgardenio.com. And because fall is Austin's quote-unquote second spring, he wants people to buy plants. Coming out with an app in late August, Gardenio is raising funding, and it's an exciting time for Roman right now as his goals are being realized, trying to grow his community literally and figuratively. And exponentially. I'm sorry, I had to throw that in there. It's kind of our shtick if you've been around. Alright, thank you for listening. That's my update. Hit it with the extra. As always, you can contact us at theexponentialists.com under the podcast tab if you have any words of wisdom or advice that you would like to give our listeners for the next segment. Also, feel free to recommend any exponentialists you see in your community that could be guests on our podcast. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see y'all next week.